Ladies and gentlemen, I was very privileged last week to attend the Ramayana conference that was held. I saw a banner outside your mandir here. And in preparing the speech for the conference, it gave me the opportunity to learn a lot about the Ramayana itself. And one of the key issues that I discovered, the many epics, the many stories that you get from the Ramayana, actually is symbolic of the many fundamental values that we need to have as individual human beings in our own lives. And I think the point is this: sometimes we as human beings get carried away with the actual symbolisms, but forget the real intention as to why those symbols are there in the first place. Why those stories are there in the first place. It's not the story itself, it's not the epic itself, but the values from it, and how we use those values and apply that to our daily lives. That, I think, ladies and gentlemen, is the key element. And unfortunately, I was not able to participate. I see Swamiji over here this evening. But from what I gathered after that opening, there were a number of very interesting issues. You know, they talked about the applicability of the Ramayana to climate change, to environment. It of course boils down to how we also treat each other, how we treat our children, how we treat our women, how we treat our poor, how we treat the marginalized, how we treat people who are not like us, who may not look like us, who may eat differently, who may think differently. But our ability to be able to see them all as human beings, of course, is very critical. And all religions teach us this. The significance of Diwali, of course, is that, as we all know, and as the President has also highlighted, it is the triumph of light over darkness, of goodness over evil. You had Lord Rama, who was exiled in the forest for 14 years, and this is symbolic of his homecoming. So the lights all lit up. He comes back to Ayodhya, and this is what it symbolizes. But it's a lot more deeper if you look at the teachings of Diwali. A lot more deeper, a lot more significant. You know, what the President reminded me of, he talked about, you know, how we see ourselves. You know, the same way symbolically as we all clean our house for Diwali and prepare it for the guests, prepare it for the puja that's going to happen on the night itself or the night before, whatever the case may be. But the significant thing is, are we cleaning up our own lives? Are we doing that internally? And of course, the wonderful thing about Diwali is that you get to do it every year. And there is actually a rationale behind it. It's because God has given an opportunity to say, well, maybe there are certain things that you have done wrong. This is now a new opportunity to rekindle, restart. So you're washing away the past year. You're lighting the light to symbolize that a new beginning. And of course, it's the Hindu New Year too. Diwali marks the Hindu New Year, which follows after the celebration itself. So these are very key elements that we need to think about as to what Diwali is actually doing for us individually. Of course, it is a time to celebrate. And that celebration is not limited to anybody. As you know, we have people now in Suva, I don't know what they do in Lambasa, but you know, in Suva, you literally have now kids going from house to house, asking for sweets. And nobody ever really says no. We may not have much to give, but we do give something. And that obviously means the idea of sharing, the idea of giving. You know, one of the stories that really stuck in my head after doing some research on the Ramayana was the lady called Shabri, who was waiting for Lord Rama to come, but she wanted to pick the sweetest berries for him So she used to bite it and then see which is the sweetest one, and the sweetest one that she used to keep aside. Now, but he did not actually not eat it and say, well, it's half eaten, or that this woman is, maybe of a different category or social category in society. So that goes to show that there was no discrimination. I mean, we talk about discrimination, unfair discrimination in our constitution. But these are all lessons that are already there. But the reality is, unfortunately, sometimes we get so carried away with our own materialistic agenda of life. We forget the simple things. As I've said in other places, that you have politicians or public speakers or people in public life who may talk about all these values, etc., but we must practice it in our own lives. There's no point in me talking about standing up publicly and say domestic violence is a wrong thing, but I go home and bash up my wife. It doesn't make sense. In the same way, the way that we talk to our children is very, very important. So ladies and gentlemen, the significance of Diwali, I think, in Fiji we are just so lucky that we get to celebrate in such a big manner. I think we are the only country in the southern Pacific, and I could be wrong, but it could be the only country in the southern hemisphere, if you don't take into account Indonesia perhaps, where we celebrate the 3 or 4 key religious festivals and have actually a public holiday for it. So in Fiji we have the wonderful opportunity to share this. And I think people who think or who believe that a religion is only restricted to only those people who follow that faith are missing out on a lot. And I want to again re-quote what the Honorable Prime Minister quoted in Parliament, and I quoted last week. And one of the former presidents of India, President Kalam, said that for great men, religion is a means of making friends. For great men, religion is a means of making friends. For small men and women, they use religion as a fighting tool. And that is so true, ladies and gentlemen, of all faiths. People who misuse their faith, who miss the fundamentals, and I think the missing of that true message happens because people forget to practically apply the principles of what is taught, for example, in this case in the Ramayana. People forget what is the symbolism, what is the real meaning behind Diwali. So, ladies and gentlemen, that would be my simple message to you, that as human beings, and those of you and those of us who are celebrating Diwali, either as friends or from a religious perspective, to please look at the fundamental reasonings behind that, the fundamental reasonings behind the symbolisms, the fundamental reasons behind those stories, those epics that we do get told. As wonderful, as interesting those stories are, we need to look at what are the values behind it. And I wish you all a very beautiful Diwali, a fantastic Diwali, and to celebrate it, to forget some of the, you may have some squabbles with family members or your neighbors or friends. It's a time to sort of forget that. Let's not carry that in our hearts. Let the light shine in your heart, as the President said. Let this purify it and start the new year on a clean slate. And that is very, very important. Sometimes we tend to not necessarily be very loving to those who are the most dearest to us. One of the beauties of public office, I personally feel, is that I have been given the opportunity to be able to help people. And your President is absolutely right. The joy that you can get from helping somebody who may have some land issue, somebody whose son or daughter may not be able to access education, who may not have access to water. Just yesterday somebody sent me a text message, the day before, saying that I'm not getting consent to get the electricity on my land and I want to have electricity before Diwali. When he sent me about 5 text messages, I do not know this man, I do get a lot of these anonymous text messages. But the fact that I was able to facilitate that, and the fact that he is able to now have at his home electricity before Diwali is very, very pleasing for me. You can sleep well at night. But these are the small things, ladies and gentlemen. And these very small things we all can do. You know, there's a saying that the greatest charity you can ever give is a smile. And sometimes we forget that. So I would urge all of us to take the true symbolism of what Diwali is, what it should mean for all of us, and enjoy it and share it with the rest of the community, with everybody, with your family and your friends. I'd like to wish the Sabha all the best, of course. I'd like to urge the Sabha also to have a lot more outward manifestations of religion, because all religion is good. And I'd also like to publicly acknowledge all the work that you're doing in the education sector. And many of the organizations, ladies and gentlemen, as we also heard last week, the Ramayan conference, we had the Cyclone Winston, 44 people lost their lives. But the amount of people that actually came out and actually went out, for example, distributing food, giving out rations, giving out building materials, without discrimination, without asking, you know, what ethnicity are you, what faith are you, do you belong to this denomination? None of that was asked, but people gave freely. And that really is the symbolism of true humanity. So I'd like to thank all of you who contributed towards that. You know, it is something that we all need to do. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the invitation. अब हम तो हिंदी में तो बात नहीं कर पाए हैं, because बहुत comfortable नहीं है. But आप लोगों को, you know, I wish all of you a very happy Diwali, and I wish you a very wonderful and a new and a very happy and a healthy new year. Thank you very much.